Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Lexington Fate. And before we have Lex come up and share their presentation today, just a quick bio about Lexington. Lexington is a queer, mixed, and trans potter, educator, and community organizer. They have come back to the ceramic studio after 10 years working in education. Lexington earned their BA in arts with a focus in ceramics from Western Michigan University and is the ceramic resident at the KAA this year. Their work moves between sculptural and throne forms, working with organic shapes and atmospheric kilns. Lex has focused primarily on self-firings. And I invite you to share a warm welcome as we bring Lexington Fate up to the podium.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here today, and I appreciate your time and attention. I want to begin my presentation with gratitude. I want to thank my mother for being here today and for always supporting me during my ceramics and pottery discoveries ever since high school. I want to thank Julie, without whom I would not have access to this residency and who encouraged me to apply in 2023, and in whose beginning ceramics class I rediscovered a love of clay. I want to offer you a roadmap of what we're going to be doing here today together. I'll be introducing myself. I'm going to take a moment to honor the land that we are on and share my process of clay and show you primarily focused on the body of work I've been creating for this residency. And I'm going to let you know how you can connect with my work if you enjoy what you're seeing, or if you're just curious. So to begin, my name is Lexington Fate. My pronouns are they, them, their, and this is me in 2025. That's actually the self-firing you'll be learning more about later in my presentation. And then this is Lil Lex. I think that's 1993. My mother would know better. It might be 1992. I was a big fan of a one-color jumpsuit and a pony. I include my younger self in this presentation because I find as I continue to grow and mature and really get to know myself more, I'm just getting closer and coming back to that young child that I was. I also want to acknowledge the land that we are on today. So I want to name that I'm giving this presentation in now what is called Kalamazoo, Michigan, but this is actually the stolen land of the Potawatomi and Peoria, and also the wider Anishinaabe peoples. This is a screenshot from a map from native-land.ca that is accessible to anyone. It's really neat because you can find the indigenous territories. All of these colors are the indigenous territories from this continent called Turtle Island, but you can also find the lands from anywhere in the world. I want to acknowledge that I'm a settler on this land until land back, and that after land back, I hope to be a good guest. I now want to share with you all some of the inspiration for the work I've made here at the KAA. Entering this residency, I was following a feeling of inspiration from natural forms, the weathering and organic carvings of stone and ice that reveal layers, shadows, and negative space through pulling and tearing away, and the substrates of our smallest plants and how they grow on top of one another in their own way, forming layers that grow and expand. I was drawn to forms that hold depth, layers, and contours. The pieces that I began making at the beginning of this residency were primarily sculptural and designed to be hung on the wall. I worked in both stoneware and porcelain, but almost immediately was drawn entirely to porcelain There's something about the texture and the density of this clay body, and also the crispness of color that shows up because when it is fired, it is a brilliant white. That whatever colors you put on top of it show up more authentically. I like to think of my process as something akin to echolocation. When I'm in the process of carving and forming these pieces, it's like I'm putting my senses out through my hands into the clay, and the clay is communicating back to me how far I can go, what the potential is in different areas. And I often make many mistakes and move quite slowly at the beginning. For instance, the largest piece in the middle here that has the title porcelain on it, that one took me about 8 hours. And at this point in my process, I'm now able to move to 4 hours. Being with the clay is very meditative. It turns my brain off and it allows me to be completely present, which is something I deeply value. Some of the artists that I have been inspired by through the sculptural piece, then seeking different methods to create texture, are artists like Alex Olson, who is in the upper left-hand corner here, who uses a technique called faceting, which is where you use something that's kind of like a fancy cheese slicer. And what you're doing is you're carving away elements of the clay. And then the second artist you see here, Joseph Bounds, is demonstrating a technique called kurinuki, which is a traditional Japanese technique of carving and tearing from a single block of clay that is then hollowed out. When I received my BA in arts with focus in ceramics from Western Michigan University, I was primarily working on the wheel. The work I began creating in sculptural form was like a refresh for me. It was entering into beginner's mind to kind of air out assumptions and to begin again. What I found as I worked sculpturally was that I could come back to the potter's wheel with fresher eyes. Not only that I could look at, and not only that, but that I could look at other people's work with excitement. And so these are some of the pieces that I've been creating. You'll see this tool right here is what I mean by the fancy cheese slicer. And then this is a rigid, really it's a kitchen tool, but a blade. With the encouragement of my faculty advisor, Julie, I began exploring the techniques I saw artists like Alex Olson doing with faceting and the techniques of kurinuki. I began to couple these two ways of interacting with the clay along with the potter's wheel. Moving into the body of work that I've been creating for this residency, I began making a series of thrown cylinders and using a faceting tool along with the large cutting blade you saw on the previous slide to carve and tear away the exterior of the vessels. Initially, this was the exploration of texture that I was seeking for my sculptural pieces. I was searching for a texture for the outside that would create a juxtaposition similar to like a geode. And you'll see that in the before, they have this smooth exterior, and then after the carving, they do look more like a stone. The next phase was to carve the feet into bisque fire. Bisque firing is the first firing stage where the pots are no longer clay. They will not dissolve in water, but they are still porous. This is the stage where glaze is applied to them, to then be fired in a second time. The porcelain we use here at the KA looks gray when fresh, and then after firing turns white. This stage of my residency was a time when I was accumulating finished greenware pieces to fill an electric kiln. In the electric kiln, my work was bisqued, and this was very exciting to me because one of the goals I'd always had was to create enough work to fill an entire kiln myself. It's always neat when the kiln is done and you look and you're trying to find your work amidst everybody else's work, and it's an entirely different feeling when you open that kiln, it's all yours. So that was a goal that I was able to meet during this residency. Another goal I had was to fill an entire high fire kiln with my work. This is the salt kiln that we have here at the KIA out in the kiln yard. These are the 3 burners that lead into the salt kiln during the firing. Salt kilns are a high fire kiln that basically fueled either by gas or wood. And when the kiln is past 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, salt is introduced into the kiln where it bonds with the clay, forming a glass-like glaze finish. Inside the salt kiln, pots go from bisqueware, which you see on the before here, to glazeware, which you see on the after. This is now the second firing my pots have gone through, and they go from a bare white bisqueware to the glossy exterior glazeware you see here. The glossy exterior is the salt that's been combined with the surface of the pots. The darker pots you see with the blue or green interior have a black wash on the outside of them, which I use to highlight the tearing and the raw elements. And then the white vessels you see have no wash on them at all. All gloss is the salt. This is the salt kiln once the door has been bricked up and it is in the process of firing. The firing can take, it's a spectrum of time. It can take anywhere from, let's say, like 24 to 30 hours. Tending the kiln feels something to me like my own internal process. I take a longer time to process. I'm an internal processor. And I often do feel much like how this kiln is going up to 2,300 degrees, that inside of my own self, it's actually the more intense moments, the heat of experiences where I get the proudest outcomes. What you're gonna see in this video is me salting the kiln under the tutelage of Julie. You're gonna see me wearing a face shield and pouring road salt into an angle iron that will be then inserted into the kiln. Julie will then remove a brick from the port. This port is directly above the burners. And when I insert the clay, I'm going to be dumping the clay directly onto the burners. Once I remove the iron, Julie will replace the brick. And I do want to name that, unfortunately, the emissions from the kiln are not environmentally friendly. And one of my future goals is to find some ways to mitigate the environmental impacts of salt emissions. So here's the video. There is no sound. I am sorry, environment. We're now going to look into the kiln after the firing. After unbricking the door of the kiln, now comes the unloading. It's like opening presents to see what the kiln gods have gifted me with. Sometimes they're gifts, sometimes they're comeuppances. It really just depends on what mistakes I made and roll of the dice. This firing were a lot of gifts. You can see that there are pots staged on the bag wall. These three right here. This is the bag wall. The pots that are staged on the bag wall were the ones that received the hottest and saltiest treatments from the firing, and they're also three of my favorites. The bag wall is a wall that forces the flame from the burners to flow upwards and facilitates movement of the flame throughout the kiln. It's also a very dangerous place to put your pots. I was cautioned to make sure that when I was inserting the salt that I always did backwards away from my pots, because when you saw me inserting into the kiln, I was only about like 6 inches away from these three pots. And if I had moved a little too far, I could have knocked one over, and then it creates a cascade effect. The pieces that went through this firing will be in the residency show opening on May 2nd from 5 to 8 p.m. here at the KIA. This body of work has been an exploration in silhouette, layering through carving, tearing, and sculptural contours. I have grown as a potter both in practical skills with electric kilns, as well as grown as an artist through self-expression and taking risks. These pieces are symbolic of the ways that life has shaped me, highlighting the missing pieces and allowing them to be beautiful and rough. What I've learned in allowing some things to bear color and others to simply be bare is a lot like self-compassion and boldness. I feel like my pieces demonstrate that what is broken is not incomplete. I came into this residency wanting to get to know myself through my art, and I believe that I'm doing that. I look forward to firing at least one more kiln load in the salt kiln and continuing to make work that stretches me and shows myself. these pieces I have before you are connected to the inspiration of nature that I have. So I hope that you can see some of the resonance between these bare white forms and the weathering of an iceberg, the carving and ripping away of these porcelain pieces and the natural formations of rock. And not only that, but the lichen, this soft color that grows on top of the rock, I also mimic with my celadon glazes. And then lastly over here, with my sculptural pieces, they're very reminiscent of an iceberg, with both the flow and depth. If you have enjoyed my work and would like to learn more or follow my process, you can find me at clayandfate.com. The site will launch on May 2nd when our residency show opens. My process, which has been documented through photograph by my friend Paul V, will be on display there at my site, and my work will also be available for purchase. I look forward to seeing you all at the residency show on May 2nd here at the KIA from 5 to 8 p.m. And I